Good afternoon and welcome everyone to another GreenBuzz Agency webinar. With so much going on in the world today, we especially thank each of you for joining and spending this strategic lunch hour with all of us. My name is Amelia Oliver and I'm the marketing strategist here at GreenBuzz Agency. And today we're joined by two absolute powerhouse leaders in digital media who we cannot wait to hear from. But before we get started, if any of our audience members ended up here and don't know exactly who we are and what we do, GreenBuzz Agency is a full-service video production company. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we specialize in documentary, motion graphics, branded content, and of course, virtual production. So if you or your teams are curious about the process of making a video or are looking to tell your own story and add video to your marketing and communications mix, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Bringing it back to today's webinar, this is the 18th in our GreenBuzz Agency webinar series, which was created to connect our community with thought leaders who can help us break down top-line strategy, best practices, and advice during these highly, highly unusual times. And now, given that we've had almost 20 episodes with over 40 panelists, you might be wondering where you can go back and refer to some of the top-line strategy we've been covering throughout the pandemic. So if you'd like to check out any of our previous episodes, visit greenbuzzagency.com/blogs. There, you'll be able to see the on-demand recordings of all of our episodes, which include strategies and ideas from executives at Twitter, PBS, Sotheby's, Make-A-Wish, NASCAR, and many, many more. Today's episode will focus on how to build a content strategy based on behavior and segmentation. So if you're looking to get deeper sense of audience behavior and fine-tune your approach to content marketing, you're absolutely in the right place. So now it's time to jump in and introduce our panelists today. We are joined by Amanda, the VP of Content Strategy at Bustle Digital Group, where she oversees content for Bustle, Elite Daily, Nylon, The Zoe Report, and Romper. Previously, Amanda served as the digital deputy editor at Teen Vogue, and she brings an extensive background in both the reporting and digital strategy sides of online media. We're also joined by Lainie, who is a digital content consultant and the former head of original video, OTT, and audio at HuffPost. Lainie brings over 10 years of experience in the TV and digital landscape, and today is a digital strategist for big media outlets like USA Today. Thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your insights and experiences with each of us. I'm so looking forward to diving in and getting deep into content strategy with each of you. So with that, let's jump right in and I'll hand the floor over to Lainie.
Hello, friends. Welcome. Also, Amanda, in your headshot, I love that you're wearing a leather jacket, and I wish I were as cool as you. But also, Amelia, super interesting to know this is the 18th webinar you've done because this webinar is old enough to vote, of course, in election time. So anyway, kicking it off, you'll love a Ron Burgundy meme. I know I do. So I just want to basically go over how editorial video operates as a three-legged stool. So let's get into what we're covering. So basically the stool philosophy sounds a little wacky, but stay with me. Then we've got editorial as a product, also another philosophy to consider. We got a case study, which has some interesting numbers. Hopefully you will find them of interest as much as I do. And then cross-functional synergy, and then positive and productive outcomes. I'd like to keep with coming from a place of yes and keep it positive. So next up, the stool. So on top, we have video. And just because it's on top at the top of the stool doesn't mean it's the most important. It's just to reinforce that it cannot live in a siloed capacity. So video, you often see it just out there in the world. And a lot of times there are content creators, whether they're individuals or sometimes even at editorial publishers and even branded agencies, where it's a little bit like throwing spaghetti against the wall. And definitely being experimental is amazing in the wild, wild west of digital and the internet because things constantly change. But in order to really meet metrics success, you really need to be engaging in your product team and your audience team and your sales or marketing branded team. At various places, it's called different things. When I was at HuffPost, Sales and marketing and branded at one point were different groups. Then they were all kind of combined to be the same. So, in this regard, even though sales, marketing, branded are three different categories, in this capacity, I'm lumping them together as one. And so, without the support of these three different teams, which I'll get into more a little later, you're not going to have video not just not be successful, but I kind of liken it to the Southern saying of, even in this case, like let's say you're engaging with product, audience, sales, marketing, branded, but the cross functional coordination isn't as strong with one of these. And so it's like if you chop 5 or 6 inches off of one of these legs on the stool, it's still a stool, but would you sit on it? I know I would not. So it just translates to video is not going to be as successful. And now more and more video KPIs aren't just being owned by the video team, it's being owned as a company goal altogether. And so when it is successful, then the other groups are successful. And a lot of times you see places say, we're pivoting away from video. And you definitely want to honor where publishers are going if that's something they wanted to divest. But if you actively engage with your product audience and the sales marketing branded team, you'll find that that isn't a go-to that you necessarily have to do in your toolkit. So going into editorial video as a product. So as far as video editorial as a product, a lot of times people think, oh, editorial video, we should sort of treat that differently than we would as paid content or even like an actual product, like a toy, an energy bar, skincare product. But your editorial video is a product on its own. It definitely reinforces brand awareness, brand affinity. And so you want to approach it as though it was an actual product you're putting out there in a marketing capacity. And so as part of marketing approach, there's oftentimes talk about the customer journey. And in the customer journey, you want to consider how are people coming to your content? And is that a seamless experience? Because if it's not a seamless experience, people are just going to hop out. And so one of those being when you interface with product, you chat with them and say, hey, the video product on our desktop or in mobile web or even our app is not loading the video as quickly as it could be. And so when you have that experience, your pre-roll is not going to play. So if pre-roll, ads are not served, you're not making video. But at various places, KPIs are different. So one place I worked, a video needed to be viewed at least 3 seconds in order to count as a video start. So again, if with product, you're not interfacing with them to say, hey, we're not making as much money on pre-roll because our video player isn't as productive as it could be, then that's a no-win for both teams. And then also, let's just say that's not the experience. You have a wonderful video product, your pre-roll is playing, people are watching, they're watching the whole video, it's a whole kumbaya. But then you need to evolve. Like, what is it that we could be doing more editorial video with our product team in order to keep people even longer with video or through the carousel of videos, watching more videos in the time that they're spending on site, not just watching one and hopping out. So one place where I worked, and various other places do this as well, there was a sticky player created. So the video is at the header of the article, but then as you scroll down to read more of the article, then the video becomes smaller on the right side of the article and stays with you so that you have a complementary experience to the article. And I'm sure as Amanda understands and other editorial folks, you want to make sure that your video and audio complement each other and not parrot each other, which is why it's so magical, I like to say, when you can create a video experience like this so that those complementary experiences are happening simultaneously and in a continuous capacity. And so also think of your product team as a key stakeholder in, hey, we have an app, we want to feature video there, but how can we encourage even more app usage for our video experience. And so working with them, you can have a much more inventive way of doing that. So it differentiates the experience from mobile web or from desktop. And so then you have higher engagement within an app. The same can be said with auditory experiences. Certainly people go and listen to podcasts wherever they get their podcasts. And that's great. But let's just say you have a new podcast that you want to start. Leveraging your product team, having synergy there means let's come up with a revolutionary way to feature at the header of an article or on our front page. What is it that we can offer so that people will listen to the podcast or a shorter version on site, so that people are aware from a brand awareness capacity that, yes, we also have auditory experiences. Moving on to a real world example. Before getting into the numbers here, I just want to emphasize the importance of an analytics partnership. So we talked about the product partnership, and now here we're interfacing with analytics. So, a lot of places it's well known to use them. This is not a revolutionary idea. Obviously, I did not come up with this on my own, patent it or trademark it. But there's so often a disconnect between audience team and video. And so, in my experience, audience teams are so wonderful. Audience being, the folks getting your numbers from various platforms, but also the folks who are the conduit of distribution on O&O, off platform. But a lot of times audience teams can be very numbers oriented. And so what gets missing as sort of the disconnect is extrapolating a narrative from the numbers. And that is like a motto I want to tattoo on my head. I want to wear it as a shirt, embroider it wherever you can. Because if you're having a team that's giving you a bunch of numbers and you have content creators that appreciate, this has high video views, but don't know the context of it, then again, there's no narrative from the numbers. And so essentially where you want to be is you want to be sure that when you're seeing the numbers, you say, oh, okay, we did an 8-minute long video. Typically we do 2-minute long videos. People watch 3/4 of this 8-minute long video. Let's retool our content slate to give more of that type of content. And with that, your audience team would say, wow, when we put that up on YouTube, that's really making an impact and we become a bigger player in YouTube. And again, that's not revolutionary, but what's great about leveraging that is once you become more participatory on those different platforms by working with audience, then you're someone that's on YouTube's radar to be in beta mode when they're doing different tools. And so that when they go live with something new, you're part of the slate of publishers or brands or agencies that have been participatory in using it in beta mode. And that's another place for revenue generating opportunities. So here in this example, the first one, 120%, a very exciting number. That's the number of increased video starts of O&O video. So not off platform, but O&O. And so with that, there is an exchange you have to have with audience on packaging. So it's not just about the content. You could make the most exciting content, but if you're not working with your audience and distribution team on how it's being packaged, whether it's being more SEO friendly, whether it's having conversations about what a thumbnail should look like, A/B testing the thumbnail on site, which is again, something you have to be participatory with your product team. Because as a lot of people know, you can do A/B testing easily on Facebook. They've always had that built in, but there are many editorial publishers that don't necessarily have that bells and whistles. And that's why, again, can't emphasize enough. Working with product, how do we A/B test the thumbnail? Then letting audience know, hey, audience, we're going to A/B test the thumbnails and let's try different packaging. And then, of course, we're also on video re-engineering what numbers are we getting from the first 3, 5, and 10 seconds of a video so that we're in a place of making sure the content is resonating with the audience. Because even though we're content creators and we want to make the most fabulous and important and impactful stories, if your audience isn't engaging with it, you're doing a disservice to them, which means you're diluting your brand. And that's obviously not the way that you want to go. And so when it's come to being connective tissue between audience and product, and we'll get to the sales branded team in a second, I have usually operated in that capacity. And then my direct reports have as well. And so through that curiosity and commitment into diving into the numbers myself, then what's really great is you start setting the pathway for there to be a more contextualized conversation. So the audience team knows like, oh, you're right. We can't just do a brain dump of numbers. Let's work with video and video working with audience and figuring out, again, extrapolating a narrative from the numbers. Whenever we cover these types of topics, they don't resonate as much. So either we need to re-engineer how we cover these topics because we believe as a brand that's important for our audience, or we need to scale back on covering that content and reinvest in other parts of your content slate. And so with those numbers, with that type of example, when you have that particular like 120%, video increase in video starts, then you need to take the step to then let the sales, marketing, and branded teams know. Because if they don't know that there has been, moving the needle, then there's no extra story there for them to say, this is why our brand is different than other brands. If you can say, wow, look how much in this impressive way we're moving along in video, which is one of the more expensive content mediums, more expensive than a tweet, oftentimes more expensive than an article. They really need to know that, because then when they approach Nike, vitamin water, whatever it is, then they can say, hey, you know what? You should bring your dollars to us, whether it's for pre-roll or branded video opportunities, or prior to COVID, live editorial events. They're able to say, our competitors that you're maybe seeking to put your money towards, they're not having as much success as we are. So look how interesting of a brand we are from this success. So moving on to 24%, that was the increase in video views off platform, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at the time, because this was at a place I was working where TikTok was not yet a thing, or Instagram Reels. And so off platform obviously is just as important, because then you become of interest for Facebook and Twitter partnerships. And one place where I worked at HuffPost, we ended up doing a partnership with Twitter that was covering women who were running for office for the first time. And so with that was something they were interested in with HuffPost, because there's this historic narrative of moving the needle forward, increasing video views, content slate of auditory experiences, and then also really well programmed and packaged content. And of course, there are revenue generating opportunities when it comes to YouTube, and then also Facebook when you have ad insertions on both places. I just got a question that says O&O. Apologies. I don't mean to speak in jargon. That's actually a thing I try not to do. So O&O is owned and operated. So essentially owned and operated, for example, working at USA Today, they're owned by Gannett. And Gannett actually oversees not just the USA Today brand, but about 200 local properties. So whether it's in Savannah or it's in Arizona, those are all within the scope of owned and operated. And the difference is, let's just say when I worked at Yahoo, we were on the receiving end of people who would distribute their articles on Yahoo. So let's just say it was an ABC News article. For them, that's off of O&O. So hopefully that was helpful as far as O&O goes. And then the differentiation of also O&O is off platform is your social media. So YouTube, TikTok, and the list goes on and on. But owned and operated is also what they call on platform. So on your homepage and any other like subsidiaries that the overall brand oversees. So for instance, at HuffPost, it is owned by Verizon Media. Under Verizon Media, you have Engadget, TechCrunch, Makers, AOL, Yahoo, HuffPost, and several others. So if Verizon Media were to say, our total O&O views are XYZ, they're alluding to all of the video views that are happening on the website there. They're not alluding to YouTube, Facebook, and so on. So getting back to real world example, original O&O video completion rates versus third parties. When you are any type of brand, not only most likely are you making your own video, but you're actually also receiving video from third parties. So whether it's like from Condé Nast or Now This. And so those videos have a certain money that they make from a CPM. And so basically there are times when you say, oh, playing our video on site means you make more money than playing a third party video. But sometimes a third party video has a higher revenue generation from pre-roll than original video. So you obviously want to honor programming a video that is the highest revenue generating opportunity. But what's really great is if you have a high O&O, so on platform, on site, on your website, video completion rate. What's really great is to give that feedback loop to product. So they know, wow, the product we created for you all, a better customer journey and experience of engaging with video on our website is really working. And from that partnership, then they'll say, thanks for letting us know that, but also like, we're more encouraged to work with you. And then in addition to that, when you have an uptick in original video, that's something, again, you want to circle back with your marketing, sales, and branded teams, because that's another way for them to augment and position their story when they go to brands like, again, a Nike or Vitamin Water to say, hey, we're not just having an increase in views, but we're also seeing that our own video is so compelling. And so again, if you're looking to put your dollars somewhere, we're the ones where you should put your dollars. One thing I did want to note, back to the increase in video off platform, way back when I worked at Thrillist, using the whole extrapolating a narrative from the numbers, working with an audience team in figuring out what's the best way to package and distribute, we ended up having a wonderful situation where in less than 6 months, we were part of the 1 billion views in Facebook. And at the time, you know, everyone was doing food videos and getting into the cocktail video space. And so in such a crowded space, it was definitely a huge win for us. But the only way that happens is to really talk to your audience team to say, hey, what quartile in the video, like, you know, the first fourth, half of it, 3/4 completion rate, are people really hanging on? Because let's just say people get to halfway through the video and you start to see, hey, every time we're kind of halfway through the video, in this Thrillist example, we're always doing like a really wide shot of the food. How about we start making sure we drill into only close-up shots? And so then you see, oh, okay, the close-up shots are or aren't working. And so you retool. So when I say extrapolate a narrative from the numbers, it's you see the numbers for your videos. You start to see where trends are, which it gets a little manual as far as taking the time to see, oh, where is it people are dropping out and what do those videos have in common? But it's so important, even if it feels like it's such a huge task, depending on the volume of video you have. But when you divide and conquer with your audience team, then it's absolutely doable. So with each team, you definitely, want to differentiate which each of them brings. I really do believe in swim lanes. When people understand their impact on cross-functional coordination or synergy, it makes things very clear. It expedites the process, and people aren't stepping on toes or feeling like toes are being stepped on. So with product, you have in their scope, they heighten the visibility of your content. So if they're able to make a video carousel that can be at the top of your homepage, that's something that they're the ones who are facilitating the visibility of your video. Or, heightening the visibility of your content, again, within an app. And there are other places as far as maybe just not your homepage, but specific articles where they can create video products that the video can happen at the top, the middle, and the bottom of an article. But the thing you don't want to have happen is you play the top video, and then when you scroll down and you play the second video, both audio is happening at the same time. So that's where product is having, in that capacity, creating a smoother customer journey by making sure that in that scenario, you're not having all three video, audio play at once. So I see that someone has asked, please define audience. Is that the group that is extracting the data? So wherever I've worked, audience is the folks who not only extract the data, so run the numbers from YouTube, Facebook Insights, Instagram, and from your actual website, O&O, and that's the team that's giving you the numbers. And so that's wonderful, but you could give 1 million numbers to a video team and they would say, okay, this is just a bunch of numbers. What am I supposed to do with this? So that's where, again, for me, extrapolating a narrative from the numbers, you start to see, wow, last week, everything we did with kittens and corgis didn't do so well. But we know in the historic narrative of our brand, kittens and corgis have always worked. And then you see that happen another week. So that's where you say, okay, we should dial back on kittens and corgis. And per the audience numbers they've given us, lean into unicorns. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but I find when sharing examples with folks, if you can have some type of animals, it sticks. So yes, so audience is the folks that are extracting the data from social platforms and from your own homepage website. And so with that, again, they give you the numbers, but like, what does that mean? And so that's where if you have a partnership with them and be really honest, like, what are we getting from these numbers? What does that mean for retooling our content, how we package our content, and what information can we tell product to say, hey, we're not even seeing video starts. So what's going on your end that we can make this better? So then getting to the third stool or third leg of the stool, when you have audience that's extracting that data, you want to be sure that video isn't the only team that's getting that. And product isn't the only ones aware of that, particularly in cases if you're not even having video starts. So when you share that with your sales, marketing, branded team, they're starting to be more read in on what content slate is working. And so I find the biggest disconnect is that with a sales or branded or marketing team, they're not always in the know on a content slate. And so if they're not in the know, how can they position the content? And a lot of times with branded video opportunities, you want to make sure that the video that you're doing for branded is in the spirit and in the storytelling that's similar to editorial. Because if it's so disconnected, then you're not going to have engagement in that particular branded video, which means then you haven't met the metrics for success. And then that brand doesn't want to come back to you. So knowing what the numbers are for an editorial video, editorial slate of content, it really helps educate the marketing, branded, and sales team on what works and doesn't work. So that anytime, let's just say a lead comes into sales and it's like Walmart is really interested in, now this is just an example, not actually saying Walmart has done this, but they're like, we want to really go forward with, women empowerment series. Like, let us know if you have that. It's great for sales, marketing, branded to say, oh, actually, that content is something we already have. It performs well. So let's do a deal. Like, we're in alignment. And that's why you just can't have video in silo. It absolutely has got to be interfacing with product, audience, sales, marketing, branded team. And so getting on to the audience portion of what each team brings, they help heighten visibility of content as well. So they're the ones, again, packaging, making sure that in the packaging it's SEO friendly. They're the ones who you work with to ensure that thumbnails are the most visually interesting so that the visibility of your content, again, interesting enough that people want to engage with that. And with that, they're facilitating data discovery. So on our own, a lot of video content creators, we have access to Facebook Insights and all of that. But you're not seeing it holistically if you're only seeing the data from Facebook. Your audience team is getting it, again, from your own website, from YouTube, from Instagram, from Twitter. And so with getting the holistic look at that audience team who's extracting the data, then there really can be a triage and game plan to go forward. And so on this slide, getting to sales, marketing, and branded team. So they're helping you with what's called the customer persona. So it's like, who is your user? And that's, again, going back to the example of like, who is your intended audience for this skincare product, for this toy, for this software I've created? Usually this group, sales, marketing, and branded, they already say, oh, hey, it's Second City Singles in Cincinnati and Chicago, or whatever they're categorizing as their customer persona. Like, it's split men and women, and they're usually between the ages of 24 and 50. That makeup of the customer persona is so helpful because we know that those people of those age ranges, we can start to get a sense of what they're more interested in. Because when you're dealing with, let's say, Gen Z versus millennials, there are a lot of millennial-oriented brands that become your competitive set. And so in that customer persona, it's not just their age or where they live or their self-described gender, but it's also what are the other editorial publishers that they're engaging with. And when you have that information from your sales, marketing, and branded team, you can say, oh, okay, that helps educate what type of content we should lean more into versus not. And Facebook Insights is really helpful with that. And then when you go look at a piece of content, in this case, video, it will tell you what are the top cities that are engaging with you. And so it's just really great to know that if you're looking to further retain an audience in those particular cities, you would lean into that type of content. But if you start seeing like, oh, the cities from the top 10, 5 to 10 are these other places that we want to tap into even more, because that would be wonderful to expand our audience, then you can start saying, well, what is it that those people from those cities are watching more of? And making sure that you augment your content slate with that type of content. They're also the folks that package revenue generating opportunities. So if this team doesn't know what your content slate is, they're not going to be brand fluent. And so one example I can think of is if you have a branded team and they're like, we're doing branded video, it's going to be on the website, and it involves, let's say, an on-air personality. If they're not fluent in the brand, then they may choose someone that is not brand approval. So you never want to have that be the case, because then your branded video is so disjointed from editorial that it will seem like totally the tone will be off. And so in that capacity, as a video creator, editorial content creator for podcast, video, articles, you really have to have that feedback loop with your sales marketing branded team, because you don't want them to commit for a branded video slate that, say in this case, like again, a Walmart, where you say, yeah, we're going to have this on-air personality and Walmart co-signs on that, only to then circle back to the editorial folks and be like, hey, this is what it is. This is going to appear on the site. And next thing you know, your editorial people are like, absolutely not. This person is not on brand. And so in that capacity, that's where you have to have the synergy of these three groups. Any kind of questions that you may have, feel free to take a screenshot of this. Happy to always answer questions. I'm always online. But one thing, shameless plug, feel free to follow my dog, Ziggy the Whippador, little rescue dog, in case you ever need some dog programming. Sometimes the Siamese cat also makes an appearance. But overall, the takeaways are editorial video can't do it alone. It needs a strong relationship and feedback loop and consistent collaboration for synergy so it can lead to success. Video success is no longer just being owned by video. It is also an overall company initiative time and time again. And so if you want to be in a place where teams are always going to be relevant, revolutionary, you have to always be in conversation with one another. If you merely coexist and have half-hearted collaboration, again, that's cutting 5 or 6 inches off of one of the legs of the stool. It's still a stool, but would you sit on it? And basically, in order to strengthen the scope of work that you're doing and preparedness for the future, you just have to make sure that your product team knows the successes and sadly failures that are happening so they can revolutionize their product. You have to have audience be able to collaborate with you to do A/B testing, package things more interestingly, and have them be your partner and extrapolating a narrative from the numbers so that it's not just a data dump and no one knows what to do with it. And then obviously have your sales and marketing team be in the know of the cool updated product for video that the product team is making, the wins and worries from audience that we're seeing from different viewers on different platforms. That informs how they position the brand. And from that, everybody makes money. So hopefully this was helpful. I know I'm a fast talker. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. But just don't forget the three-legged stool. It will be your best friend. So thank you. Oh, sorry. Passing it off to Amanda, by the way. Have to reinforce, she and I work together at Yahoo Health. And she definitely powerhouse there. Powerhouse, obviously, at Bustle, and super boss lady. So handing it off to her.
Thanks, Lainie. That was great. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Like Lainie said, I'm Amanda, and I'm the Vice President of Content Strategy at Bustle Digital Group. There, I work closely with all of our different editors and departments on story ideas, packaging, promotion, resource management, and the like. So today, I'll share how we at BDG find and pass along new findings and learnings from one brand to another, but in a way that keeps each brand's identity intact, which, as we all know, is so important. I just want to say, first off, that I'm sharing all of this with you from an editorial perspective. So I'm going to ask all of you to put on your imaginary digital editor's hats for this presentation, for all of you who may not work in editorial. So at BDG, we have 8 brands, all with distinct identities. They all have a unique point of view, a unique tone, a unique team producing the content. But they're also all very similar to an extent in that they're all websites. They all serve readers on the same platforms, and a lot of them cover the same topics, of course, in differentiated ways. So it's kind of expected that something that might be learned on one brand could also somehow, some way be applied to another brand. It's just a matter of figuring out how to share and apply that in a way that makes sense. For us, there are generally 2 steps to accomplishing this. The first step seems simple on the surface, but it's fundamental to everything. And it's to start with a crystal clear understanding of what your brand identity is and isn't. Then the second step is to be in that constant learning mindset. For me and my team, we're thinking at all times about how something learned on one brand can be applied to the others. Let's not reinvent the wheel here, right? So let's start with how we think about number 1 at BDG. Many of our lifestyle brands do technically target the same audience on paper, millennial women. But it's very important to us that every editor has a clear understanding of who their specific millennial woman reader is, down to the nuances. So I'm going to show, for instance, how we decipher this on Bustle. So Bustle, for instance, the Bustle reader has a sense of who she is in the world and her role in it. She cares about mental health. She cares about making the world a better place. She, of course, knows how to have fun and is a big consumer of entertainment, but she's also mindful of the entertainment that she's consuming. She's willing to shell out for the luxury item, but she also loves Old Navy and Target. And we know that Bustle, therefore, is all about providing content that serves this reader, whether it's through affordable and inclusive fashion coverage or obsessive TV coverage or social justice content. And we know that Bustle will always be fun and cheeky and smart through all of it. But we also know what Bustle is not. We are not a breaking news or politics site. We're not CNN, we're not Politico, and we know that our readers don't expect us to be that either. We cover tech, but we know that the Bustle reader comes to us for the how-to stories on Instagram, not the latest industry news on Instagram. And tone-wise, we know that Bustle will never be too serious nor overly earnest. So, since we have this clear understanding of what Bustle is and isn't, as well as who the Bustle reader is and isn't, we're able to then apply that to the voice and tone of our articles, as well as our areas of coverage, look and feel of the website, etc. Everyone producing and editing content is very clear on Bustle as a brand, and we hope that our readers are too. So again, just to quickly go through the differentiators. So Romper, the point of view is pretty clear. The brand is for millennial women, but with one big differentiator. She's a parent. So all of our content is going to be written through this lens, either through direct parenting content or written for the person who we know is a parent, even if the story topic isn't blatantly about parenting. If the story doesn't check those boxes, then we know it's not a Romper story. All right, for the Zoe Report, again, which is our luxury fashion and beauty site, we've got another really clear point of view. The TZR reader is all about style and trends from an elevated perspective. Anything outside of that perspective isn't TZR. All right, Elite Daily. We think of our Elite Daily reader as a bit of a younger version of a Bustle reader, still a millennial, but there's a difference. She's someone who's in that self-discovery phase and is exploring life on her own terms. We differentiate from Bustle, therefore, by making sure that every article either takes on this tone or it directly addresses topics that are literally about self-discovery. So, for example, stories about travel and exploration or viral TikTok trends or rainbow makeup. Anything that doesn't have this air of self-discovery or fun is not Elite Daily. And then finally, Nylon. Nylon is the most established brand in our portfolio as it's been around for decades, but the Nylon reader knows what's cool before everyone else does and cares deeply about music and culture. Anything that doesn't fit in these buckets isn't Nylon. All right, so now that we've kind of given the run through, now you're welcomed into my world at BDG of what each brand is and what they stand for. We've established the importance of brand identity and kind of gone through how we've differentiated those brand identities within BDG. So let's now talk about sussing out a learning from a specific brand and figuring out how to broadly apply it. As digital editors working in a newsroom, our best practices include everything from the way you might format an article or a headline to maybe using a specific type of photo or image or illustration to optimizing an angle of a story or the format of a story for a particular platform. So these are the broad base level best practices that all editors are trained on, that all digital editors are expected to have an understanding of. A lot of times, as applies to any industry, best practices are developed from everyday learnings observed on an individual brand. So let's go through a real life example from the Zoe Report where we identified a learning that we wanted to then share with everyone else, but in a way that didn't dilute brand identity. All right, so this is our example. This was one of the Zoe Report's top stories in October. This is kind of how the article looks. If you were to Google it, this is what would show up. And this is, for the record, the search headline that was used. So you can see it's got lots of great keywords in it, like Kate Middleton, vest, fall 2020, fashion trend, cool. On Facebook, this is how it showed up. You could see that it was posted at 11 a.m. You see that was the caption for it. Pretty simple caption, nice short headline. You see that it uses the word controversial in it, which is, a nice adjective that ups the ante a little bit, eliciting a sense of, intrigue maybe. The image that we use is nice and cropped into Kate Middleton's face. So you have to click in to see what the trend is. And then this is how it appeared in the newsletter. So you can see that that's the headline and the subject line that we used. Kate Middleton just nailed this controversial trend. And yes, again, very simple. So again, we have our editor's hat on. Let's talk this out. When I see a top story like this, the next step is to then figure out why it's working. Was it Kate Middleton that readers gravitated toward? Was it the word controversial in the Facebook and newsletter headlines? Was it that the story was about vests, which are fall's big fashion trend? Was it the image or the post time or maybe the headline character count? So there's a lot of things to kind of assess here and a lot of potential learnings that you could draw out, right? So we need to take the time to suss out what exactly it is that seems to work and why for the Zoe report specifically. What is the learning? I do want to add one quick caveat before I go on, though, is that, of course, one example or one story or one case is never going to make a rule. I would not just take this one story in a vacuum and say, okay, this is all gospel now. Let's apply this to all the other brands. But say this is one of several stories that all seem to have had similar success due to these common themes. By looking at analytics, as even what Lainie was mentioning in her previous presentation about, listening to your audience development people and noticing patterns of what seems to consistently be working, then you can prove out the hypothesis enough to then feel confident sharing the intel among the other brands. So all that being said, say you took the time to then figure out what your learnings are. Now you need to share them. When you're doing this, keep in mind that the learning should never be one size fits all. What you don't want is for a brand to just straight up do the exact same thing of what worked for someone else. That now turns it into an off-brand idea, creates brand confusion, dilutes the idea, and also hurts the brand where the success was initially found because now everyone else is doing it too. That's why it's so important to go back to that step one of making sure that you're crystal clear on the brand's identity to begin with. That way you can adapt the learning in a way that's specifically tailored to the brand. So for me and my team, we always like to give specific examples for editors so that they can see example use cases for how to implement the learning. There can be no confusion at that point. So let's go back to this same example on the Zoe report with the Kate Middleton best story. Let's say success from the use of the word controversial is what we wanted to actually pass along. So let's take the time to understand what it is about this word that worked. Was it that it stirred up emotion and curiosity? If so, perhaps that's actually the learning we want to pass on, to use adjectives and headlines that conjure up those emotions. Instead of just, hey, Elite Daily, try using the word controversial next time in your headline, which is not productive or good. Or maybe it's the learning that vests are really hitting as the fall fashion trend that people are interested in. This could be good to know for our brands that heavily cover fashion, like Nylon or Bustle. So how would they cover that then? Again, that's where we tailor and maybe suggest a story idea unique to the brand. So for Nylon, maybe it's leaning into that music angle. So like 10 times Billie Eilish wore a vest in the most 2020 way. Or for Bustle, again, leading into the size inclusivity or the budget factor, maybe it's 10 vests that go up to a size XXL that you can buy for less than $50. Or maybe it's Kate Middleton, and you're realizing that what worked here with this story was reader interest in what she wears. So maybe there's a learning for Romper in here, where we could ask editors to keep an eye out and cover any parents or mom-related items Kate wears for a celebrity outfit story. So for instance, that necklace that she was spotted wearing with her children's initials. And then, of course, there's always the brand agnostic takeaways that you can just share without any tailoring, like publishing timing, for instance. We know that late mornings seem to particularly work for this celebrity outfit story on Facebook, right? It was posted at 11 a.m. So that makes us think, what other brands also heavily cover celeb outfits who could benefit from this posting time intel? That would be, a great piece of intel for the brand's social editors, for instance. Okay, so now it's time to talk about how we disseminate what we find too. I found that there are two main ways that work for my team and the brands that we work with. The first is pretty simple. It's probably something we all do. It's just official documentation, your official Google Docs and the like for posterity so that people can look back and refer to them when they're covering that topic, maybe for the first time or if they need to go back and reference. And the number two, though, are the more casual, constant, ad hoc sharings of learnings, basically the thing before it becomes the best practice. For this kind of dissemination, again, the name of the game is tailoring. What is the best, most organic way for whoever is receiving that information to receive it? And it's not going to be the same for every team. It will feel like additional work to tailor your dissemination of information to how a specific team works and how they process the information. But think, if it helps that team process it better, which then helps them apply it more easily, then it's worth it. So again, in practice for us, social takeaways, we G-chat to relevant editors, or we'll append them to weekly email social reports and share them in weekly meetings. Meanwhile, a search takeaway, we're not going to do that same way. We're going to give it out along with keyword guidance via email because those kinds of stories are often done more in long-term planning. Meanwhile, something where we're talking about publishing timing guidance might be given via Slack or email to only the editors who manage that kind of scheduled content, like maybe our fashion and lifestyle editors. So in sum, my message to you is just embrace tailoring. And in order to best do that, you do need to have that crystal clear understanding of your brand identity. If you have that, you're able to customize the learning in the way you disseminate it to the specific brand. And the effort it takes to do so is always going to pay off, and it will ensure that your brand identity stays intact. All right, thank you so much. That's it from me.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Amanda. And thank you, Lainie, so much. We loved having you both on. I just got word that Lainie has had to leave for an election emergency, and I know that everything is kind of crazy at the moment. So what we'll do this time, a little bit differently than normal, is we'll wrap up this section. And if any of our audience members have questions that they'd like GreenBuzz to facilitate, we can definitely do that and have Amanda and Lainie answer those for you. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, especially in the middle of such a crazy moment. And be on the lookout for our next webinar, where we'll be hosting an exclusive fireside chat with LEGO's Creative Director of Digital, James Gregson. It's going to be another very special and interactive episode where you'll be able to ask James all of your questions directly in that session, so you don't want to miss it there. You can also check out the on-demand recordings of any of our previous episodes, which is at greenbuzzagency.com/blog. Finally, an enormous thank you again to Lainie and Amanda for sharing your wisdom with us today. And thank you everyone who joined us. Again, if you do have any final questions that you'd like us to facilitate to Lainie or Amanda, please email us at info@greenbuzzagency.com, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much.